Hi, this is PrivateerStation, and today we're bringing you Yulia Latynina and her mini-series about unique wunderwaffles or wonder weapons that Putin's regime claims to have. This is part 1 that aired on August 1st, 2022, and it is titled Putin's Nuclear Viagra. Enjoy! Hi, this is Yulia Latynina, and today we're starting our mini-series about invisible entities that surround us, that are everywhere, in the water, in the sky, almighty, unknowable to the usual people, about which we can only make judgment based on somebody else's words, and we can only see them at the judgment day, when they come down from heaven, or rise up from water. Perhaps you're thinking about the archangels. No, I'm talking about strategic nuclear weapons that Putin regime has and all the means they have for its delivery, about avant-gardes, Poseidons and others that are forbidden from knowing, and you can get 15 years in prison for even trying to. And listen to that stream. We hope you'll learn something new. Click the like button, and remember to subscribe to Yulia Latynina and to the PrivateerStation if you are listening to that in English. I will start with Putin's message to Federal Assembly on the 1st of March 2017, where Putin claimed that he has these archangels, and even showed cartoons where they were flying. He, for some reason, was calling these cartoons and animations videos, and he claimed that this message knows a strategic character and defines the destiny of our country many years ahead. And at first we'll talk about these cartoons, and then we'll discuss what happened to them in the 4 years that ensued. We think it's most important because these weapons and these cartoons might have some influence on what is going on in Ukraine. Andrei Piantkovsky, who was in our streams earlier, did mention that he saw Putin talking about that, and he saw Putin really believing that. He was rather bored when he was talking about economy and all, but when he started talking about the newest strategic systems weapons that Russia is developing as an answer to American withdrawal from the agreement about anti-missile defense, then is when his eyes became bright and he was agitated and involved and excited. So these weapons are the backbone of everything that Putin's regime relies upon. His nuclear systems is, in essence, insurance against any involvement of the West into the deals of their own country. However, Putin in the current war is not threatening Turkey with these nukes, although Erdogan did take a pretty hard position against Russia and pro-Ukraine at the beginning of this war. But Putin somehow is not threatening Turkey with anything. So let's go back to the initial list of what was claimed to be developed. First of all, it was missile Sarmat that is supposed to replace missile Voyvoda. Sarmat will be equipped with hypersonic nuclear warheads and will be able to reach targets from the north or from the southern poles. Sarmat is a very dangerous weapon based on its characteristics. None even the perspective anti-air defense systems can intercept it, and then he demonstrated the video, which of course was a cartoon. Then he said that other weapon is a cruise missile with a nuclear power drive that already exists. And he also claimed that in 2017 they actually tested the launch of the newest Russian cruise missile with a nuclear power drive. The quote also continued that the missile reached design speed and nuclear drive performed nominal. So if one believes Putin, since 2017 Russia has a very fantastic sci-fi weapon, missile powered on the nuclear reactor. the one that flows pretty low, that carries a nuclear warhead, practically unpredictable trajectory of flight, and uninterceptable by any existing or potential anti-air defense system. Putin also requested to demonstrate a video. There was another cartoon, and to conclude that, he said that nobody has anything like that in the world. What's curious, does Russia have it? But we'll get to that. The third one is Poseidon. Besides a nuclear-powered cruise missile, Russia developed underwater drones, underwater nuclear drones that can reach their targets underwater, reach the shores of the other continent and explode at the shore, causing tsunami. They are supposed to be traveling underwater several times faster than modern torpedoes, warships, or submarines. This is just sci-fi, said Putin. It's amazing that we have it. No other means can intercept these drones with nuclear warheads, and they can attack the seashore line of the enemy with nuclear warheads. And I'm quoting further. President of Russia also claimed that in December of 2017, they concluded a many-year testing cycle of the nuclear drive for that autonomous underwater vehicle. That nuclear plant has a very small size, very small imprint, about 100 times smaller than normal submarine power drive, and has 200 times less time to reach the max power. It was a cartoon again that they demonstrated at the end of it. They had a competition for the name for that system, and it ended up being called Poseidon. And the fourth element that was introduced is the winged block, winged module, that was named Avant-Garde, that was basically to serve as a platform. Again, to quote him, from existing battle means, the system differs that it can fly in the atmospheric levels on speeds of Mach 20 to anywhere in the world. That flying winged block can maneuver both longitudinally and change its altitude as well. It makes it invincible and hard to detect for the defense systems. It approaches the target as a meteor. The surface temperature reaches 2600 Celsius. It actually approaches as a fireball its target, and it is uninterceptable. And he said that all these weapons were developed so that Russia would have taken a proper place and be respected in the world. As you see, we're not making any mystery out of our plans, and we are talking about them to conduce our partners to negotiate. Nobody wanted to listen to us or to involve us in their processes, so now they will have to. So, in this series, we'll try to answer the question if these weapons exist. If they do, how many articles could Russia possibly have, and how dangerous could these weapons be? I would also say that this question is not often being answered, because Kremlin propagandists, they do like to say that they have all these wonder weapons and they can annihilate any aggressor. At the same time, Western countries, even though they do probably understand or suspect that these things don't fly or it's not too fresh, and these ideas are taken back from 1960s, when they were acknowledged to be unperspective or not feasible. In the meantime, some of these ideas were actually tried in USSR in 1980s, and we'll see if Putin's manufacturing machine evolved or degraded compared with the Soviet potential back in the day. One can say that the West is probably not really questioning these weapons too hard, because it's easier to ask for more money from their military funds to build more weapons to resist these possible wonder weapons of Russia. So the West doesn't really have it as a priority to investigate these things deeper. They don't take it too close to heart as a task, because otherwise they would have to explain that that stuff doesn't fly, and very likely the funding will be diminished. So I'll start with that. What I'm talking about is my new mini-cycle, Tools for Killing, where I discuss other wonder weapons that they may have. And there were a couple earlier streams dedicated to that, Tanks Armata and wonderful radio location system that is supposed to intercept and destroy UAVs. And I'll start with that we don't see these Armata tanks, we don't see Hermes missiles, we don't see anti-air location systems. We kind of see that, but it doesn't do as it was supposed to. So supposedly these other 4 tools we discussed, they will appear on the last day, when it will be really difficult and it will be the last tool for Russia to use, sort of a doomsday scenario. So one can say that, following the usual logic, that since in Arctic it's impossible to grow oranges, and in a country where there is a lot of kleptocracy, where law is not the rule, where people put behind bars for opposition views, this country is very unlikely to develop good technology. Ivory Coast cannot make iPhones. The country that cannot make a proper cell phone would not be able to make a super sci-fi laser. And the problem is another side of these things is that this is not the weapon that one can touch or see. So Putin and his regime are talking about some wonder weapons that nobody can touch or see, and claim that they're superseding China, America, or anybody else in the world. So one can also say that in the religion that Putin is creating, sort of a secular religion of his own goals, that these weapons will be serving as archangels, and he is probably successful in convincing his own country that the whole West is against Russia and they do need these unique tools. So do they have these weapons? I would say kinda yeah, but there are details. So let's go into details about that, and before we deep dive into this, to build some base for judging Putin's words about the uniqueness of these weapons that don't have analogs, let's remind what Russia does have. Because Russia is a nuclear country, nuclear power, and according to the public knowledge, Russia has 1,420 nuclear and thermonuclear warheads. America has a little less than that, 1,365. Russia and states claim to have about equal number of nuclear warheads, and this is the vast majority of all the nuclear warheads in the world. Another thing that is important is nuclear triad means to deliver these warheads. It's strategic bombers, nuclear submarines, and ballistic missiles. Strategically and historically, bombers were the first tools. They are the oldest part of that triad. And to put it simple, it would be very difficult to use these planes as they were designed to. I'll bring a simple example. During the war in Ukraine, Putin is using some of his strategic aviation. First of all, these are Tu-22M and Tu-95, and they're used as a standoff engagement. What is it? This is when a strategic bomber reaches a certain milestone, a certain area, behind which it becomes too dangerous for it due to the anti-air defense of the enemy, and it shoots a missile that flies another 2,000 kilometers. In case of Ukraine, this is Ha-101 missile that is being launched from Caspian Sea area and once in a while hits the target in Ukraine. Some missiles are being shot from the territories of Russia or Belarus in the same manner. At the beginning of war, Tu-22 and Tu-95 were also launching some of these missiles from the Kievan Sea. They were flying somewhat closer to the territory of Kiev, but now they're even afraid to come that close. They only launch these things from territories of Belarus or Russia. So this is a type of a standoff engagement, when the plane behaves in a manner that will preclude it from being even possibly shot by enemies' anti-air defense systems. And one should remind that these weapons are used in that manner with a country that does not have nuclear weapons, with the country that has a much weaker air defense systems than United States, for example. So just logically deduce if these bombers will be able to reach any possible points that would allow them to shoot these missiles at any targets on the US side. The answer is resounding no. Russia, as of 3 years ago, had 60 strategic bombers. The other component of the nuclear triad are nuclear submarines. There's a huge factory where we were making them up north. I've been there. It produces an amazing impression. There are 70-yard assembly halls, and this factory was building 5 to 7 submarines a year at the end of USSR. And that factory was going to be building a submarine that nobody else built, with a body made of titanium. And two companies, VSNPO and FISMA, were trying to build this submarine. Sevmash, Northern Machinery, was a conveyor to produce these submarines. When they stopped their work, the conveyor stopped, and the factory actually did not know what to do, because they were stuck in an awful situation when they did not have money to complete the current submarines on the assembly line. They needed to heat the factory, and they did not have enough money to heat the whole thing. So when the factory tried to build some consumer products, they also figured they are not competitive on the market. There was a rather well-known story in 2005 when Sevmash concluded a contract with Norway. It was supposed to build 3 semi-submersible platforms, blew through all the deliverables, delivered only 2, and never got another contract. So, according to 2017, Russia had 10 nuclear submarines with 160 nuclear carriers, submarines of Dolphin, Squid, and Borei types. And one should mention that in the Soviet Union times, some of the experts said that Soviet submarines are a very limited capacity tool. Now, due to the way that Russia is positioned geographically, that Russia doesn't really have much contact with the Atlantic Ocean. Pacific is different. It's easier to operate in the Pacific, but in the Atlantic, it's much more difficult to attack Europe or east coast of the United States. Russian submarines can leave only by certain channels, and these channels are well known. So America and its allies put very sensitive equipment to listen to submarines, and Russian submarines are rather noisy, so they were alert if any of the submarines went out, and they were chasing and following it pretty close. Why was Soviet Union building these submarines? The answer was very simple: because NATO has them. We have to be just as powerful as they are and have the same tools as they do. This is not a sound military logic, but it's an understandable bureaucratic logic. And of course, the third component of nuclear triad is ballistic missiles. According to the 1st of October 2016, data. I'm sorry for data being a bit that old, but after that, different sources have different numbers. Here, at least, we have somewhat of a baseline number. So back then, Russia had 300 nuclear missile complexes that could carry, which could carry over 1,000 nuclear warheads, and without any exaggeration, one can say that everything I said here about strategic bombers and even submarines, partially or fully skeptical, all that skepticism evaporates completely when we're talking about ICBMs. This is indeed a weapon of a judgment day that is very difficult to intercept. As an example, we can take R-36M, also known as Voyevoda, also known as NATO classification SS-18 Satan. This missile was developed in the construction facility Southern in Dnipropetrovsk, and it was put to service in 1975, almost half a century ago. This is a freaking amazing tool. It has 2 stages, and it is also being fired from a silo by a special pressure powdered tool, basically a third half stage, and formal range of this weapon is over 10,000 kilometers. But this is formally, because potentially it can be shot into low Earth orbit and it can stay there as long as necessary. It can take orbit and fly through North or Southern Pole and hit the target down on the ground. Why is it not doing that? Is because after that development of that missile and the perspective of saturation of low Earth orbit with these missiles actually called or caused Russia and United States to sign a strategic nuclear weapons treaty that prohibited from using space and low Earth orbit from these weapons. There is also a civilian version of that, is missile Dnieper, which takes about 4.5 tons to the low Earth orbit for civilian needs. So Satan can take 10 splitting warheads to the low Earth orbit, and it can also have 40 traps that also shoot together with the warheads and cannot be differentiated from the actual warheads. Then it reaches the speed of about 10 Mach 10 when it goes down from the orbit to the targets on the ground. Here I'm leaving a hook. Remember Putin's speech when he said that winged block avant-garde, when it goes to the atmosphere, it reaches Mach 10. He wasn't really lying, because a body falling from orbit actually speeds up to about Mach 20 as any other object falling from space on the ground towards Earth in these conditions, including warheads of Satan missile. Or remember, Putin was saying that new Sarmat missile would be able to circumnavigate the globe and fly over northern or southern poles. Indeed, it is true, Sarmat can do that. But Putin forgot to mention that its predecessor, a previous generation of ICBMs developed in the Soviet times, could do that. And there are very little chances for the air defense systems to intercept any of these warheads. And these chances dwindle if there are more warheads and if there are heat traps. And one also should mention that American nuclear doctrine doesn't really include much in terms of intercepting Russian ICBMs and their warheads. So every time when Putin declares that his new Wunderwaffle will not be intercepted by American air defense, we'll talk about those wonder weapons separately, but he's not really telling anything new, because the previous generation of warheads was also not to be not interceptable for American air defense systems. So there is nothing new in this regard. But there is a bunch of questions about technical condition of all that wear that Putin inherited from Soviet Union, because they're using hydrazine, and this is a very destructive fuel, and one needs to rotate it properly and needs to maintain missiles properly. So one of the journalists, Osechkin, who recently got his hands on a big archive of documents of defense, where there is also a lot of corruption, and everything is going there in a similar way as it is with Russian tanks. So he's saying that the majority of these missiles will not fly, and a good half of them will blow up in the silos, but this is not still an important moment. Just like the Russian tanks on the roads, even if half of them break down and clutter and clog the pathways, the remaining number is still enough to produce enough military action on the territory of enemy. So, however many of them will leave the silos, they will still produce enough threat for any foe, any country that they're targeting, be it United States or Europe or anybody else. So these weapons can cause damage, unacceptable damage to the United States, and this is not, summing it up, this is not a weapon that Putin developed. This is the weapon that he inherited from USSR. So it's sort of somebody as if found the remnants of an old civilization and dug up the Death Star from some ancestors. He's waving a nuclear bat that he did not create. And all the parameters that he's claiming his new wonder weapons have will be flying around Earth, around southern and northern poles, will enter the atmosphere at Mach 10 plus, uninterceptable by any air defense systems. One can ask, are you keeping me for an idiot? Because Satan had all of these exact characteristics. And we'll conclude our first introductory part on that moment. In the next stream, we'll take a deeper look into these new tools that he claimed he developed as add-ons to the existing weapons that he inherited, and why, if he developed anything new, why is he using the old specs, old characteristics of the weapons that have been developed by his predecessors as new characteristics for his new weapons? Putin was complaining to the Federal Assembly that nobody was listening to them in his speech in 2018. However, according to the 1st of July of 2017, he had 300 nuclear warheads with exact same specs, which could reach targets by the north or southern poles trajectories, that could enter atmosphere with hypersonic speeds, reach over Mach 20 at the highest peak, and they were uninterceptable by any other modern means. So what exactly did Putin achieve that everybody should applaud and say nobody ever did anything like that? We are now truly great, and we all should listen to our leader. What exactly did he build? We'll be looking into that, and we'll start with Poseidon, a submarine carrier for which Belgorod was just put to service recently. We'll talk about that in part number 2. Please subscribe to Latynina TV, share, click the like button. See you later.